All right. My name is Sue Reno. I'm a fiber artist. I live in beautiful Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where I spend a lot of time hiking and gardening, and then a tremendous amount of time interpreting my experiences and the images that I encounter into textiles.
How long ago did you get into textiles and start creating your pieces?
I've been literally working with textiles since before I can remember. I was one of those little girls that was sewing things as soon as I could hold a needle. So I've made clothing, I've made home deck, I used to make more traditional quilts. About 9 years ago, I decided to become a dedicated professional art quilter.
Okay. And so tell us a little bit about what went into it when you decided that you were going to become a professional art quilter. What do you have to do to make that happen?
Just pretty much declare it. That's one of the beauties of working in the arts. I mean, if I do the work and I put it out there, there's no one to really challenge me. I mean, there's people to critique it, of course, but
Right.
a career in the arts is a career as an entrepreneur, and so if you just A, do the work, and B, declare it and get it out there, you're in business.
Right. I love that. So what were some of the avenues that you went through to actually get your work out there and noticed by people?
Well, I was coming into it right when the internet was exploding as an avenue of creative expression and primitive social networking. So I think that played a large role in it, because before that, even though I was working largely in isolation. But the early listservs on the internet, finding a community of like-minded people it was a huge influence on my decision to move forward, and having that community to talk with and bounce ideas off of and learn about avenues for expression and exhibition made a huge difference. So that, and again, these were early days to some extent, but building a website and learning how to use all the technology was a key part of it. Now we just take it for granted, but there was there was a time when it was new and exciting.
Right. So when you were getting started and doing everything on the internet and website, was there any point in sort of launching your business that you hired someone to do other parts, or did you just figure out how to do everything yourself?
I'm lucky in that I have an extremely supportive spouse who happens to be an IT guy. So,
Ah.
yeah. So he did a lot of the heavy lifting and taught me how to handle it from their end. So I haven't ever hired anybody outside, luckily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Now I know that you do show your work in galleries. Do you also do craft shows, or kind of what different avenues do you go through to actually sell your work?
I will try almost anything, and I think that that's one of the keys to being a working artist, is you can't rely on just one avenue or one gallery or one, craft show venue. You have to try a lot of different venues, especially when you're starting out, to see where your work's going to fit and where it's going to be appreciated. So I do a lot of juried exhibitions nationwide and even in other countries from time to time, where you apply to the exhibit, you send in your images and your statements and so on and so forth. And if you're accepted, you ship the work and it's hung often in a gallery setting. I also do the large quilt shows, like the AQS show that was recently in Lancaster, where it's a 3-4 days where they bring in everything, set up exhibits. There's vendors. It's a very social event. I do those from time to time. And I also work with local galleries from time to time and have done some solo shows. So a little bit of everything, really.
Yeah. Is there one of those that is your favorite thing to do?
I prefer, when I can, to exhibit my high-end work in a gallery. The kind of work that I'm most interested in making is larger pieces, one of a kind, very unique, very time and labor and talent. That's a funny word, but very intensive to produce.
Right.
And so that's the kind of work I prefer to produce, and the best venue for that is a gallery or high-end exhibit setting. But I'm not a snob about it. I'll go any place where they're willing to display it.
Right. So I was actually just talking to my students last week about pricing of work.
Yes.
Which I think is challenging for anyone, especially when they're getting started and figuring out what kind of price tag am I supposed to put on this.
Yes.
So how do you figure out the price tag for your pieces, especially because I think, they're quilts, but they're a lot more than just a quilt. So how do you go through that process?
Several things. Yes, they are quilts, but they're art quilts or fiber pieces. And living in Lancaster County, which is sort of quilt central, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because most people are familiar with it, but often what they're familiar with is the Amish quilts or the work that their grandmothers did, which I come from that tradition. I greatly respect that tradition, but part of my role is to educate people, or to hopefully educate people in where the medium has gone, and it is increasingly becoming accepted as a medium of expression, the same as painting or photography or sculpture. It's just another medium of expression and needs to be priced appropriately. I think working as a woman in the arts, and especially working with what was traditionally a domestic medium, there is a tendency for people to underprice or undervalue their work, to just figure the cost of their materials and to discount their labor, and to even more discount their talent and their ability and their experience. So I try and hit a spot in there where I'm pricing appropriately to pay myself a living wage, but not to scare people off entirely. And it's tricky. It's not easy. What I did initially was to keep very detailed records on some of my works, to keep track of all the materials that went into it, to keep very detailed records of the time that went into it, add that all up, paying myself a living wage, double that, because if you sell something through a gallery, they take 40 to 60%, which a lot of people don't realize.
Right.
And then figure in the costs of doing business. I have equipment, I have expensive sewing machines, so on and so forth. So I broke that all down several times for some of my larger pieces and came up with a formula like per square inch or per square foot that I can use as a basis for pricing other work.
Very cool. So what are some ways that you go about promoting your work? Obviously, when it's in galleries and shows, it gets promoted through them. But what do you do personally as a way to inform people about your work?
Even if it's in a gallery or a show, I feel like I have a share in the heavy lifting. And what I really love is a gallery venue or a show venue where they make that easy for you, where they give you the tools, the press releases, the Facebook updates that you can share easily. But whether or not that happens, I have my website, which I keep updated. I have a blog, which I keep updated. I am active on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and all of these tools can consume your life if you let them, but you need to develop a strategy for using them effectively and for enjoying them. If it's a chore, you're not going to do it. So you need to sort of get involved with all of these venues and avenues of expression and promotion, and find ways that work for you and that help connect you to your audience.
Mm-hmm. So how did you decide which kind of social media tools you were going to use, and then how do you go about trying to make sure that it isn't consuming you, that you are doing the promoting that you need to be doing, but that you're not spending half of your time on the internet?
Well, I think the most important thing is to find one that you're comfortable with and to be genuine. If you're spending all of your time simply promoting yourself, people are just going to turn you off or not follow you or not listen to your updates. So I make a genuine effort to connect with people, and really it's enriched my life in so many ways, because so many of my people who are Facebook friends I've since met in real life, or I've since been involved in different ventures with them. And so it's not just me trying to seem genuine, it really is me genuine, involved in their lives, cheering them on through their failures and disappointments and so on. And so you develop a network of core friends and people who care about you and you care about them, and they help to promote you as well, just because that's, good karma.
Right, right. That's very true. So what is some of the equipment and kind of your studio space like for you to be able to produce your work?
I have what's called a domestic sewing machine. It's sort of like your mother's sewing machine on steroids, and it's a little, it's a little bigger, it's a little fancier. It has more room in the harp. So in other words, there's more room in between the needle and the rest of the machine, right, so that I can fit my work through it. That's as opposed to a very large scale machine, almost an industrial machine that a lot of artists have that let them do the work more quickly. I haven't wanted to be involved in that. It's a huge financial commitment, and it's a different way of working on your pieces. And I like the intimacy of working with it on a domestic sewing machine. So I have a sewing machine, I have storage space, I have big tables, I have foam design walls that I can move around because I tend to design on a wall and then take it over. I have a ironing board, all the sewing tools, but sort of expanded. Mm-hmm. And a very large stash of fabric, just as you would need paints to be a painter or, yarn to be a weaver. You need a lot of fabric so that it's there when you need it.
Right. Have you found that you've made a lot of upgrades in equipment from when you started, or did you kind of start out by getting everything that you really felt like you needed before?
Yeah, definitely upgraded along the way, but trying to keep it reasonable because it's easy to be seduced by equipment, and I don't want to go there. What I do really is very simple in one sense. I sew things together. That's basically the gist of it. And if I get too involved with too many tools and too many toys, I tend to stray from that basic mission, and I don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. I know there's a lot of artists that talk about designing under constraints, and I know for myself, I'm always making kind of my own rules for myself.
Exactly.
To try and push myself and challenge myself, because it is easy to just say, oh, I'll go get the coolest loom and all the new yarn. But then there is something about having some challenges.
And it can be a distraction.
Yeah.
It can be a distraction from your core work if all you're doing is chasing the latest cool stuff. I mean, I think you reach a point of saturation where I feel like I'm basically there, where I have everything I really need.
Yeah.
And it's up to me to make those tools and materials work for me.
Right. So walk us through a little bit of your design process as to how a piece goes from the kind of floating around in your head to a finished piece.
Okay. Right now I'm working on a series of works that I'm calling Flora and Fauna because I'm very interested in the mammals, large and small, that live in my suburban environment and in the woods around Lancaster County that we sort of see every day, or we see glimpses of them, or we see them as roadkill. I'm interested in exploring how they fit into our lives. So when I first got the idea for the series, I set some parameters. I obtained, and I'm working on obtaining, the skulls of the animals involved, because not from a macabre viewpoint, but because I think they're beautiful and functional, and I enjoy seeing how they're put together to work for the life of the animal involved. So every piece has a skull, which I took photographs of and turned into cyanotype prints, which we can talk about in a minute. And every piece has some vintage needlework in it, and every piece has a print I made from a tree or a shrub or a plant that I grow in my yard. So I had those are the three parameters of the work. And so I assemble those things, and then I put them up on the design wall and start to think about how I want them to work together. And I have a fairly clear idea in my mind of where the work is going, and my job then is just to assemble it so that it matches the vision that I have for it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I love that you're collecting all the skulls. That's such an interesting process as to how you're going about doing that. So tell us a little bit about the cyanotype. Is that how you say it?
Yes, cyanotype. It's a very early photographic process. Back from the 1800s, it was one of the earliest photographic processes. And it was actually first used extensively by a woman named Anna Atkins, and you can see some of her work in the Getty Museum out in Los Angeles, where she did botanical prints onto paper using the cyanotype process. And she actually produced one of the first books with illustrations, where photographic illustrations, where she made sets of these prints and put them in the text and made books from them. So it's an old process where paper, or in my case fabric, is treated with a chemical emulsion and left to dry in the dark. It's photoreactive at that point. So I take it, and I need to work in dim conditions but not darkroom conditions, and I put something on top of it that works as a resist, either a leaf or a photograph, which I've printed out on a transparency, sort of like a giant negative. Mm-hmm. I then take that assemblage out into the sunshine, into bright UV light, and there's a timed exposure, about 10 minutes or so, but that's sort of where the art meets the science, because it depends on the time of year, the angle of the sun, how cloudy, how warm, all of these things. And you make an exposure, you bring it in, rinse out the chemical emulsion, and you're left with a blueprint. It's the way they used to make blueprints for architectural drawings. So I've been fascinated by this process for years and years. I continue to be fascinated by it. It's, on the one hand, extremely simple. A child can do it. Children often do it. You make sun prints with the paper. Right. But it can also be very complex in the means of expression that it allows you to explore.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also do some where you actually print on fabric too, right? If I remember from looking at some of your pieces.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that process.
Okay, I also do a lot of architectural work. I did a series about the transformation of the old Wat and Shan building on the square in Lancaster into the new convention center. And I took a ton of photographs of it over several years, and then used different processes to put those images onto fabric. And one of them is just directed digital printing, where I play with the image in a Photoshop or similar program to, crop it, enhance it, bring out the contrast, so on and so forth, and also saturate the colors, because the colors, when you print it, the ink soaks into the fabric, and so you need to up the saturation level so that it looks the way you want it to look. Mm-hmm. And then I iron a piece of fabric onto, basically it's freezer paper. It has like a layer of plastic that gives you a temporary bond. It works as a carrier sheet. Mm-hmm. And I run the paper through my Epson printer, which has archival inks, and just print directly onto the fabric.
Oh, cool. So you do your own printing onto the fabric, too.
Yes. Yes. Sometimes when I need a lot of yardage, I'll contract it out. There's different online suppliers who you can upload your photos and they'll print for you. Mm-hmm. And I've done that sometimes to get, lengths of things. But for the individual prints, I like having control over the process.
Right. So now I know that you said that you were always really interested in sewing even as a child.
Yes.
How did you find out about and get into all the other processes that you've now been adding into your designs and fabric?
Again, I think the online community has been a big aid in that process. But again, just like we were talking about equipment, it's really easy to be seduced by process. And especially in my world, like I was talking about the big quilt exhibitions, you go and there's aisles and aisles and aisles of people selling fabric, selling tools, selling design aids, selling all kinds of things that you can, here's a new process, here's something new you can try. And it's easy to be seduced by all of that and again, get away from your core message. So I've sort of settled on the cyanotype, the digital printing, a type of printing I do using fiber paints to make images of leaves, and those are sort of my core processes. And rather than trying to broaden them into a wide spectrum of things, I'm trying to just go deeper and deeper into exploring how I can use those as an avenue of expression.
Okay. And now you said you decided about 9 years ago was when you were going to be a pro quilter. So what were you doing before then?
I was a stay-at-home mom, which is I wish there was a better term for it, because it's a more complex job than that sounds. I was a stay-at-home mom for some time, and then I spent some time caring for my parents, doing a lot of elder care, And by the time I came through all of that, I was at a stage in life that many women reach where I was ready to do what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So did you make very much while you were taking care of your children and your parents, or was that like very much on the back burner?
No, it was always something I did.
Okay.
It was always something where I felt I needed to, even though I wasn't doing it professionally, I needed my own avenue of expression. I needed my own time and space and respect for having a vocation, even if it wasn't a paying vocation at that time.
Right, right. So what advice would you give to someone really at any age who is deciding, you know what, I want to represent myself as a professional artist and, you know, maybe take myself more seriously than previously, as to, and maybe it was easy for you to kind of make that mind, switch in your head of like, okay, I am going to tell people I am an artist.
Oh no, it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
The first little bit of it, I felt like someone was going to call me out on it. You know,
Yeah.
the first time someone said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm an artist." I thought they were going to challenge me and make me prove it right then and there. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's a mindset, of course. So you have to rethink yourself, but at any stage of life, everyone is always reinventing themselves. I think we live in a time and an economy where there is no one career path that anyone embarks on and stays on their entire life. You need a continual process of reinvention. So, you know, go for it. The one thing I think that really helped me was it was important to me to always behave with integrity, to always treat other people the way I would like to be treated, to respect other artists, to respect the people I come in contact with, and never to attempt to promote myself at anyone else's expense, because it'll come back and bite you.
Right. So now that you've been doing it for a while, is there any advice that you would give as to things that you wish you had done differently, or even that you just think would have made it easier had you been aware of it when you first started out?
I don't think so. I think, you know, it's been an interesting path, but it's been my path. I think that path will vary for everyone. They need to find, you know, their own way. There's thousands of different ways to be an artist, and everyone has to find their own path to it. I think probably the biggest challenge is finding time. And I'm sure you deal with that. Just finding the time and the space to get in the creative mindset and do your best work. That's always a challenge. So I would advise people to, you know, set up a schedule or do whatever it is they need to do to make sure that the art making activity isn't the last thing on the chore list. It's the first thing on the chore list. You may have to let other things go. You may have to tell people, you know, no, thank you, I can't do that with you today. I have a date in my studio. So you need to be very assertive about that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and even that's a whole part of taking yourself seriously and saying, no, I am a professional artist, and no, I'm not just going to kind of play in my studio because I like it, even though I do love it and it is kind of playful. It is, you know, it is my job, so you're going to have to, just like if you had a job where you weren't the boss, you would have to turn people down.
Exactly. You know, I take it very seriously. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, it's fun, I guess, on some level, but it really is, it's hard and difficult and intricate work, and I think that's one of the things I like about it, that to me that makes it worthwhile, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So what kind of schedule do you have set up for yourself to make sure that you are spending enough time in your studio creating?
It is a challenge. Right now I am working a part-time day job, just as a way of taking the pressure off economically. In other words, by working the day job in a completely unrelated industry, I have a certain level of income. I can go do it. I can walk away at the end of the day, and that takes a lot of the pressure off. So on the one hand, it eats up a certain amount of my time. On the other hand, it makes me be very disciplined about the time that I do have. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I need to eat, I need to cook, I need to spend time with my family, I need to exercise. All of these things have to fit in, but I do make it a priority to work on art almost every day. And I keep one of the things that's helped me is keeping a timesheet where I just jot things down. This is how many hours I spent today. And I can sort of look at that at the end of each month and say, okay, I did good, but I really should be stepping this up a little bit. Or like, yeah, I put in the time this month and I can see the results.
Right. So now you said that you've met and kind of connected to a lot of people through social media.
Yes.
Are there any organizations that you're a part of that you've also found really helpful in connecting you with other like-minded people?
Yes, I've been very lucky in that regard. I'm involved in the PA Arts Experience, which is a local group of artists. They have a website, you can look it up, and they have a brand new flagship gallery space in Marketplace Arts in York, and just a great group of people across all disciplines, and very talented artists. And unlike some artist groups I've heard about in other places, no one ever questioned the fact that I worked in fiber or how valid it was. Very open and just took it as a matter of course. So I was lucky there, and I'm going to be doing an exhibit there in November, so that's a great bunch of people to know. And I'm also recently involved with the PA Guild of Craftsmen. They have their flagship space in Lancaster, and I've been meeting a lot of really interesting and incredibly talented people there as well.
Cool. I think those are all the questions I have for you.
Questions?